welcome to the fourth module. We are so glad that you've made it this far in the course, in the program. We are really going to start to look at our intrapersonal growth. That's enhancing our relationship with ourself. This is a vital part of the journey, Lauren.
It's a huge part of the journey, especially the subject that we've got today, because this is one of the real key barriers for a lot of people. You know.
So we're going to be looking at fear today, or pain is another way of saying it, but kind of really trying to spearhead the fear that's inside of all of us. So just a quick question: how much do you think fear motivates us?
Are we waiting for an answer? Is it rhetorical? I don't know. We're waiting for you to think about this. How much does fear motivate us? I ask myself too. What fear of what?
Yeah.
Fear of what? Usually I can see fear of two things. One is fear of failure. Two, not measuring up to our own expectations. And number two is fear of what maybe other people are going to say.
Well, that's bringing it back to our self-concept, isn't it?
Self-concept is
that's
exactly
bringing
what
us
it
back
is.
to what we think other people think about us. And yeah, fear of failure, which I think is still, even fear of failure is tied to, well, I don't want other people to think I'm a failure. It's still tied to what I think other people think about us. So this is that housing that restricts us. This is that restriction of our self-concept where we are stuck in that bubble, not able to grow out into our potential because of fear. And we'll expand on that shortly. But Lauren, the example I like to give is we've all studied for an assignment at some point in our lives.
Yes, we have, unfortunately.
We've all done it. We've all had to do it. And what do we do when we get an assignment?
We put it off.
We
wait. When's it due? Hang on. It's due at 5 p.m. today. What's going on?
And that's exactly right. We get an assignment. We've got 2 months to do it. So we bench that thing out of fear. I think FOMO, fear of missing out. We don't want to miss out on the movie we could be watching afternoon.
That's right. My mates went out fishing and I wanted to go with them.
Yeah.
And it is true, isn't it?
So fear motivates us to put it off. It motivates us to go out and have fun while we can. The assignment's not due for a little while, so we can put that off and we avoid it, don't we? Until
we get to that 5 o'clock moment
where
it's like, holy cow, I haven't done my assignment yet. And so the fear shifts then, doesn't it? From fear of missing out to now fear of failure.
Yeah, that F word, it's a hard F word, you know, but that fear of failure, it's like, man, if I don't do this, then tomorrow I'm going to fail this assignment. So what do? We work all night. We pull an all-nighter. We've all done it. And we've all done it more than once. But we pull an all-nighter to get this thing done at the last hour because we put it off. And we were motivated by fear the entire way. The fear shifted, and to begin with, we were afraid of missing out on fun things, and so we put it off. And then all of a sudden we were afraid of failing, so we stopped putting it off, and we immediately started to kind of, I guess, make it a priority, and we pulled the all-nighter. So obviously this is not an emotionally healthy way to go about life.
Definitely not. No, it's not. Living in your fear is not the way to go.
No. And just being constantly motivated by fear. I mean, fear is a feeling, for starters. So in terms of the quadrants of self, it lives in our soul, in our emotions, in our feelings, and it's immersive. So because of its immersive nature, it controls us. But that's emotional unhealth, a feeling or a belief controlling our behavior, which our behavior should be controlled by our virtues, but when it's not, we are emotionally unhealthy. And so this is a classic example of that fear. So now I want to bring your attention back to the self-concept model. You should remember the large purple circle, Lauren. What did that represent?
I remember that one. That's our potential, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yep, and it's huge. It's a big circle.
It's massive.
It's the big circle. That's your potential. But what about the red circle?
Yeah, right. The smaller red circle is our self-concept, what we think other people think about us. And it's interesting because for most of us, a large percentage of our self-concept exists inside of our potential, but a small portion of our self-concept operates outside of our potential. And while we're at this stage of growth, we we don't live in our potential, we live in our self-concept. With our misbeliefs is that part of our self-concept that's outside of our potential. It's still what we think about ourselves. It's still what we think other people think about us, but it's not true. It's false. It's a misbelief or a virtual reality that's immersive, so it's controlling us. It's forming our habits and our attitudes, but it's incorrect. It's a lie. And so we need to move out of our misbeliefs, out into our potential. But then you know what we want to do, Lauren? And that's what this model is all about. We're now talking about the fear gap. We want to break out of our self-concept. We want to break out of it and move out into our unrestricted potential. That's what we're talking about today. How do we do that? And is that red circle, is it this kind of fence, or is it a wall? Like what is it?
That's a good question. Is it a net?
Is it a net? We talk about it being restrictive, and
that's right.
You know, and it's fear. The reality is, and that's why I made it red, but it's fear. And we like to live in the very center of our self-concept, as far away from fear on all sides as humanly possible. I really don't want to be experiencing any fear. It's too painful. So I'm going to be in the very center of my self-concept, which for most of us includes a whole bunch of misbeliefs. But you know what? That's not the path of growth. There's a great quote that says, there's no comfort in the growth zone.
And there's no growth in your comfort zone.
No, that's right.
That's the one.
There's no growth in your comfort zone.
That's exactly right.
So we need to move outside of our comfort zone in order to grow. So, okay, if it's not a fence, if it's not a net, if it's not walls, what is it? Well, the answer is it's a gap. It's a space in between, it's a void in between who we are today and who we could be if we weren't afraid.
Sometimes it's a small gap,
Yeah.
but oftentimes it's a big gap. Particularly when we look at what our potential actually is, there's going to be some massive gap, a massive distance between where you are now and where you want to be, or maybe even need to be in your life. I can think of several examples of that even in my own life. And just think for a moment about your life, maybe something that you've struggled to achieve or you'd like to achieve, and maybe you think the gap is just a little bit beyond me, and how do I get from where I am now to where I need to be? It can be a frustrating time for us, can't it?
It can be. And see, our potential, who we know we could be, it exists on the other side of fear, on the other side of challenges and what have you been calling them?
Oh, I can't think what the word is you're looking at now.
On the other side of challenges, on the other side of adversity. So, we need to be able to jump this gap. So I don't want you thinking about, I'm a little afraid of the mower. So I've got a little gap, but I still mow every Saturday. I really want you thinking about that as fairly large fears that inhibit you and prevent you from growing into who you know you could be. So that's the journey we want to take you on, these large gaps that are they're unjumpable. And fear being a feeling, the counseling term and the psychology term is, it's an unbearable feeling. I cannot bear that feeling, so I avoid that feeling at all costs. Obviously, when the gap is small enough that we can jump it with a little bit of effort or a little bit of hardship, there's still fear there. It's still a fear gap, but it's a bearable fear because we're able to jump it. So we're not talking about a bearable fear. We're talking about an unbearable fear, a fear that controls our behavior and moves us out of our virtues into our feelings when it comes to our character and who we are. So I want to hand a little bit of time now to Lauren, who's going to just walk us through and share with us part of his journey and how this fear gap was at play in his life as he was developing as a young blind man, Lauren.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it has not been easy overcoming a lot of those those fears and those challenges along the way, that's for sure. And I can think of many examples, but one that I thought was interesting is particularly as a musician. I mean, I've achieved a lot of things now, so I guess obviously I've been able to close that gap in a lot of areas. But let me share one really tremendous gap that I was facing. As a teenage boy, and I was learning to play the guitar, and I'm sitting in my bedroom playing and practicing, and my parents and my brothers and sisters would hear me play, and they thought, oh yeah, that sounds pretty cool, Lauren, and that was cool. But I remember one day in year 9, our music class decides to go down to the main street of town and do some busking. There's a group of boys who get up and rock it out, and a couple of girls up there doing their folk sort of singing and so forth. And then it was Lauren's turn, and I'm sitting there with my guitar just playing and plucking along, and I think, oh man, there's a little bit of a gap there. It's a little bit nerve-wracking, but I just sort of sat there and played. And then when I heard somebody walking along, I stopped playing. I froze. All of a sudden, here's my brain, my cortex is thinking, yeah, I want to do this, and yet all of a sudden now that limbic lag thing we were talking about before, that amygdala hijacks, like, no way, Lauren, fight and flight and freeze. And in this case, I froze, and I'm sitting there thinking, man, wait for them to go past. And then the gap closes a little bit. Then I'm like, all right, it might be safe enough to play a bit more now. And I played a bit more guitar. Then, hang on, someone else is coming quick. The gap opens up again. And here I am sort of getting so nervous, and here I'm frothing at the mouth now thinking about it. Anyway, and it was traumatic, dealing with this sort of thing. I'm thinking, but I want to be able to do this, And it's funny, the process that happened. I remember probably the following year, we had a little group in the class, and a mate of mine said, hey, Lauren, do you want to play with me for this song? And I'm sitting there, 20 kids in the class, and my mate and I were playing, and I could sort of sit just a little bit behind him maybe and play, and all of a sudden the gap sort of started to close a little bit more, and there was certainly a gap there, and I could feel myself wrestling with the amygdala hijack, still thinking, no, Lauren, just keep it together, And I remember another year later, it's like, all right, Lauren, now it's your turn to play by yourself. And there was only like 20 kids there, or 30 kids, and I'm sitting there playing, and particularly if you make a mistake too, it's like, oh no, I just stuffed up, sort of thing. And the teacher said, no, Lauren, sounds really good, keep going, Oh, yeah, okay. And I kept going, and they're like, oh man, that sounded, and a couple of the kids in the class were like, Lauren, that sounded beautiful, that was really good, And so all of a sudden the gap started to just get that little bit closer, and I felt that wrestle that I was having with that, that amygdala, or that limbic lag we've been talking about before, all of a sudden started to sort of come under control, and I was able to perform in front of people. But here's where the story really gets, I guess, interesting from there, because in the years that followed as an adult, I had to perform, say, in restaurants and at weddings and things, and sometimes it was with other people, and other times they're right, well, Lauren, you're up on stage on your own, and I'm thinking, well, we're at a wedding, everyone's not sitting there looking at you, they're all kind of enjoying the company and the atmosphere, and people had come up afterwards and, oh yeah, we really loved your music, thanks so much, and you could feel the gap just starting to close. And then that one day when I got a phone call from Channel 9 television, and they're like, all right, Lauren, we want to invite you to come and play on national television in Melbourne on Carols by Candlelight. And there'll be like 20,000 people in the audience, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, I got this, I'll do this. And then they said, yeah, but there's 3 million people watching on television. All of a sudden the gap opens up a little bit more again. But here I am sitting on the stage with just 20 years of practice behind me and experience working with my classroom and my mates and my along the way. And now I'm sitting there with all the bright lights shining on this massive stage, sitting in the middle of this stage solo, and there was a guy there. The sound guy comes and says, right, Lauren, you're going to be on in about 10 seconds, mate. You're all good to go. Yeah, I think I'm okay. No, mate, you'll be fantastic. You just enjoy the moment, man. Enjoy it. Yeah. It's yours. And I'm sitting there, and then all of a sudden they're counting me in 5, 4, 3, 2. That was my moment. And I played without a mistake, without nerves, and just enjoyed the moment.
Yeah, that's awesome.
With 3 million people on television. And if you'd have told me that when I was 15, sitting there on the main street of town, struggling to play with one person just walking past, you just wouldn't have believed it.
No.
So how do you close that big gap?
Well,
Like
you know,
that.
at 15 or 14 or however old you were in grade 9, that potential for you to be playing in front of 20,000 live and millions on screen, that potential was just so far away.
Oh, you couldn't even see the other side of the
No,
gap. It was just
no.
too far away.
So, you know, and it's interesting because, you see, our potential doesn't move towards us. We want it to, and we hope it does, and we sit in our comfort zones and we're like, man, you can come to me, you know?
Yeah. Can't someone just build a bridge so we can just cruise over to it? You know, it doesn't happen that way, though, does it?
And some people even feel this sense of entitlement, like our potential should come to us. It's like, well, you know, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm a good person, so everything that I should be able to do, and, you know, the person that I can be tomorrow, that person should just present itself.
Just sort of leap out of me.
Yeah. But the reality is that's just not how it works. Our potential, it stays where it's at, and we are the ones that move. We get up out of our comfort zone rather, and we make movements toward our potential. We make efforts. It's blood, sweat, and tears often.
Yes, you have to earn it.
And we move towards, we grow, and the thing that once was a distant dream doesn't suddenly become easier. It's not easier to sit in front of 20,000 people and cameras broadcasting to 3 million now than when it was when Lauren was 15. The potential hasn't become easier. Lauren has adapted and has become more complex with what he's chosen to practice with inside his character, and he has now grown to a state where he can accomplish that difficult item. It's still difficult. It's still as difficult today as it was, I'm assuming, 25 years ago, 30 years ago?
That's a long time ago now, yeah, 30 years ago.
So it's still as difficult as it was 30 years ago. What's changed is not the difficulty of the item. What's changed is Lauren and his growth. And so that's what we want for you guys as well. That's what we're hoping your journey will include, not just starting right now, because you've already been on this growth journey, but continuing from now. And now that we've given you some great models and tools, you're going to be able to spearhead that growth and really start to, I guess, get some traction, you know? Really start to have some traction in your life as you move toward your potential. Remember, your potential doesn't get easier, but you adapt and you grow into your potential.
And you'll recognise too now with some of these models and concepts we've been sharing, kind of where and understand the reason why perhaps you've struggled in certain areas, isn't it? I think we sometimes get, the things we get right are fine, but we don't always understand what we're kind of getting wrong or what we aren't quite capable of yet. And so hopefully we've given you something that you're going to be able to adapt now to your own circumstances.
Now, I've got a couple of questions for you, Lauren. My first question is, as you told that story, and man, it's so great to hear someone who's had, I guess, really significant challenges in their life and their story of being able to overcome those challenges. That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate it. My first question is, I can identify 2 core ingredients in your story that equaled your growth. Without these 2 core ingredients, I am wondering whether or not you think you would have been able to grow. So I guess my question is, I don't want to load the question too much and give it away, but my question to you is, what do you think the 2 core ingredients in your story are, and do you think you would have been able to grow without them?
One is that I couldn't see the audience. And the other one was, I got paid. No! I didn't get paid. I couldn't see the audience. That's still true. But isn't it funny how even though I couldn't see them, I still got nervous about it? You know,
well, it's a self-concept.
That's right.
It's a self-concept. It's what we think other people think about us. Whether it's true or not, you know, it's a misbelief, but it still controls us.
I think the first thing that really helped me is very obvious to me now. And it'll be very obvious to you too. I think when I mention it, and it was the support of another person, but importantly to another capable person. Like I think, like I sat next to my mate, say like Josh here, you know, and he's here playing his guitar, and he'd had a bit more experience than me on stage before, so he'd already closed his gap a bit.
Right.
My gap was still a bit open, and so I sort of got to sit just a little bit behind him for this first gig, so to speak, and that kind of allowed me to kind of feel a bit more confident, able to close my gap a little bit because he was there sharing that stage with me. And it was kind of like, whether it be encouragement, a mentor, a safety net perhaps in some respects. And then I think of that following gig when I was there up on stage by my own, there was no safety net of the second person. But what it was the encouragement, say, of my music teacher, who said, "Hey, Lauren, no, it sounds really good. Keep going." And then even at the end of that, when some of my other mates in the audience sort of say, "Oh, yeah, really love that," it closes the gap. The support and encouragement, I guess, of other people.
Right. So there's having someone to support you who doesn't have the same gap as you. I mean, interestingly enough, Lauren, if you had chosen to busk in that street with someone else who didn't have any more experience than you, and so as people walked by, they themselves froze.
Yeah.
Would that have helped you on your journey at all?
That's it, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's interesting, but you know, how often do we often hang out with people like that though?
Yeah.
I don't know whether we like to fulfill our own prophecy of negativity, you know, and so we hang out with somebody or we associate with someone that's got a gap that's the same as ours, or maybe even a bigger gap than ours.
Yeah.
And if I'd have been in that situation, there's just no way I would have ever realised it.
Well, and whether it's as simple as, I really don't like Rebecca, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to find other people that don't like Rebecca, and I'm going to be friends with them. But we have a tendency to do that. We find people who have the same, challenges or adversity or the same emotional unhealth as us. It's like I have an immense fear of heights. So I'm not going to make friends with anyone who goes hiking mountains. Instead, I'm going to find other people who are afraid of heights so I can stay in my comfort zone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, and it doesn't matter too, Josh, what that is. In my case, it was music.
Yeah.
In your case, it might be sport
Yeah.
or a particular career path or a subject at school or whatever it is. Don't sit next to the people that are failing at it or that have got this huge gap. Try and associate with those people that have got some ability that can really help encourage and mentor you through that.
Absolutely. Now, we're not... I want to be careful here. We're certainly not saying you can't be friends with people who have challenges as well. No, certainly we need to be loving and supporting. We need to be a support person for those people who are challenges as well. So in Lauren's example, when he was busking, he could totally be friends with other people who had stage fright problems outside of that busking experience. But when it comes time for him to busk, he needs someone at his right-hand side who doesn't have the same gap as him.
And
I can be friends with other people who have a fear of heights when I'm not hiking a mountain, but when I choose to go and climb a mountain, I need to have someone come with me who is dear to me, who's a great support person, who isn't afraid of heights.
And it's interesting then, if I can take it a step further, Josh, because I know when I sat with my friend the first time to perform, thankfully, he was happy to work with a person whose gap for performing was a little wider. But you know what? My gap as a player, my technical ability, the gap there for me was probably a little closer, and his gap might have been a little bit wider. And so there was this complementary thing happening between the two of us, where we were both closing each other's gap and happy to work with someone who needed a little bit of support.
And that's important, isn't it? We can't, you said, I think all the way back in one of our first videos, you talked about we're built as humans for collaboration, that we're built for doing things together, and tackling our fears is one of those things. Now, I don't know about you, Lauren, but often what holds us back is we're not sharing with people our fears, our gaps. We're not talking with people about the challenges in life and what's holding us back. That's not something we like to talk about. So because we're not talking about it, no one can support us. So it is really important that maybe we find one or two people in our life who we can confide in and say, okay, here's a challenge of mine. This is a gap that I'm trying to close because my potential, even though it seems to be a far way away today, I know that if I work inch by inch, little by little to close that gap, well, it'll be much closer in a couple of months, and soon it may even be a jumpable gap, a bearable feeling that I can jump over that gap. I'm assuming you still would have had some fear on stage with 20,000 people and 10 cameras on you.
There's certainly some adrenaline, that's for
Right.
sure. And it's interesting that too, isn't it? That concept on its own, because we're talking about fight, and flight. Both of those responses require adrenaline, and yet if we use that adrenaline rush, so to speak, to push us in the right direction, which probably leads actually to the second
Yes.
thing that I learned through that whole process, and that is to not avoid the gap.
Yeah.
Don't avoid your potential or the goal. Don't give up on it. Keep pointing, aiming at it, keep going for it. And the more you aim, I said this earlier on, the more you aim at something, the better you become at aiming.
Yeah.
And the closer you'll get to your target. And I think that was the key for me too. It took many years to gradually get closer and closer and closer to my potential, or to the bullseye, the target. And and then that magic day comes where bang, it hits it. And you know what? I like to think of this too though, Josh. It's not like, you know what, I'm not going to be happy or I'm not going to be successful until I finally perform in front of 3 million people. You know what? I was successful the day I sat next to my mate and played that gig and made that little mistake on stage. And
that's good.
Man, that was a milestone right there.
Yeah.
And so we find real satisfaction, meaning, joy, happiness, fulfillment in the journey itself.
Absolutely.
And so every day and every little step in closing that gap is reaching my potential, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Potential doesn't happen just over here. It's every little step closer is really reaching your potential.
Well, it's time. It's that time in every video where we give you a bit of an activity or something to do to make this not just a passive learning exercise, as much as it is just amazing to sit here and listen to Lauren's story and the journey that he's been on, and there's just a wealth and a richness in that story, even just by itself. But we want to turn that into real application into our lives and our context. So we want to ask you right now to spend some time at the end of this video, before you press play on the next video, to really spend some time thinking about how are you going to do those two core ingredients? How are you going to implement those two core ingredients in your life that Lauren talked about? So the first being, have a support person in your life. And it's really important to be wise with this person. Don't choose someone who's already got the same gaps as you do, but instead be wise in your choice of a support person and choose someone who doesn't have the same gaps, so that they can really help to almost coach you and encourage you,
mentor you
into the growth that you're after. And secondly, of course, is don't avoid growth. Don't avoid the challenge. We do have a tendency to avoid the challenge, don't we? It's like, that first busking experience didn't go well. I froze a couple of times, so I'm never going back and doing that.
I'm just going to become a bedroom guitarist for the next 50 years, Wouldn't that have been a shame, really, when you think about that?
Absolutely.
Absolute shame.
So you have to have persistence. You have to be tenacious and dedicated and have the guts, the gumption, the resilience to really push yourself to continue to go back. Now, wisely, this is why I think they happen chronologically, Lauren.
Yeah.
We certainly don't want to be pushing ourselves back into a situation with no support. That's how trauma happens. So it's about having the wise support. Then once you have the wise support, getting back in there and not avoiding the challenge, not avoiding the opportunity to grow, and persisting. And remember, the growth happens inch by inch. Inch by inch, we move toward our potential. Our potential doesn't move towards us. I hope you found this session really practical, really informative, and I hope you've got something to implement right away.
Share with us your successes too. On our Facebook page, on that page that we're all members of here, share your success stories with us so that we can help encourage each other on that journey. Your successes will be a tremendous inspiration to us all.
Absolutely.
See you next time.